First thing is that HPV, there are hundreds of strains.
Yeah.
And so a vaccine is only going to, it's going to target certain strains. And when it first came out, it targeted 4
Out of hundreds.
out of hundreds.
Jesus.
Yeah. And so, there's always risks with vaccines, and we'll get into the really horrendous risks with this one and why. But, again, so you're putting this into this child's body to protect against 4 of the strains.
3 different shots too.
Yeah. And then, so over the years, they have expanded it. The most recent one is called Gardasil 9. And as you can imagine, that protects against 9 strains.
Wow.
Still 9 out of hundreds. And then also you need to look at, okay, what's the situation with, what exactly is it protecting against?
Prioritizing profits. Prioritizing
Dangerous drug and product cases.
Welcome back, everyone. Another episode of Prioritizing Profits, Dangerous Drug and Product Cases. Another week, another show.
We are back.
How did we do this week? How are we feeling?
Well, I'm actually pretty excited because tomorrow, do you know what tomorrow is?
Obviously, how could I have forgot? I'm wondering if you know what tomorrow is.
I don't think we're talking about the same
No,
thing.
let me test you. What's tomorrow?
Starbucks pumpkin spice latte.
Okay, see, I was worried you might have forgotten. Thank God we're both on the same page
can't
here.
believe that. I mean, you don't even really like them, do you?
No, I'm completely kidding. I had no idea what you're talking about. No clue.
Okay, well, I'm pretty excited about it. Yeah, they've been hyping it up for a while, and I always make sure that I get one on the very first day. Used to be a big deal. I've been trying to steer a little bit clear of sugar, but, there's sacrifices we must make.
You gotta make a sacrifice every once in a while.
Yeah, and I hate the fake sweetener, so it's gonna. But this year it will be different because I have been switching over, and actually, as you have, to oat milk rather than cow milk, dairy. Bleh. Just not so friendly to my GI system and my.
Lower calorie as well. And I didn't realize too that, I just like oat milk more.
I didn't when I first started, and it was funny. I did this whole 90 days no dairy, and so I went into Starbucks. I'm like, okay, I can't have dairy, so what do you recommend? And they said, oh, you probably try oat milk. And then I also had tried coconut milk, but it's
I think coconut and almond milk did not like both. Both those I could very clearly taste a difference.
Yeah, the oat milk I do taste. So when I first started having the oat milk lattes, they were fine, but I felt a little bit deprived. In fact, I remember one time.
Deprived.
Well, yeah, I felt like I was sacrificing, I had to have the oat milk, and it wasn't as good as the real milk. And I remember one time they accidentally made it, and I took a sip, and I was like, wait a minute. This is way too good to be oat milk, and of course I had to remake it. But now, then I finished that 90-day thing, and so I was like, oh, I can maybe have a real one every once in a while, and I don't like it as much. And I don't even normally do any flavoring in it. It's just the oat milk, and I really like the taste now. So it's interesting how you can change your palate can change.
Yeah, I've noticed that too with sugar. If you don't have sugar very often, then you don't really crave it, and some things are just too sweet. But when you stop having sugar for a little bit, or are more conscientious of it, you don't crave it as much, and then when you eat it, you're like, this isn't even that good. This is kind of overwhelming.
I still really love sugar, but I'm trying to avoid it. So a little bit here and there, pumpkin spice latte. That's the sacrifice I'm willing to make. So that's what the big national holiday is tomorrow.
Big.
Although by the time this gets released, I will have had a week's worth of them.
Yeah, you'll be hyped up, caffeined up for the next show.
Do decaf oat milk. I say that now I'm getting all.
I feel like that ruins the point of coffee, though. You get coffee because it's right in the morning, you're a little drowsy, you have some caffeine, you're drinking it on your way to work.
Yeah.
If it's decaf, then it's
Well, so I'll do one caffeinated in the morning, but then I like coffee more. So if I have one in the afternoon or evening, decaf it is. So.
Well, let's get into another big topic, Fernie.
Yes, Fernando, our
big guy behind the scenes, takes care of everything. He knows editing, he's posting, he's a marketing guy, he's a jacks of all trades. I described him to Christina's family yesterday as a Swiss Army knife of marketing, of podcasting, of everything.
Yeah, everything, website, everything. So he right now is becoming a dad.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
times two though. He has a son. He's now going to be the dad of a baby girl. Baby
Wow.
Haley is coming, and probably right now.
As we
Some
speak,
process. Well, I don't know if she's actually bursting forth right now, but they're definitely.
bursting at the seams. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's really exciting. In fact, I was shocked this morning when I got up and I saw that we had released the podcast. And in fact, I texted him and I said, that's fabulous, but I definitely didn't expect that. And I'll pay attention to Rachel, for goodness sakes.
Yeah.
You
I mean,
know?
he's a grinder. He's always there to help out. And clearly, obviously, with one of the biggest life events that you can really think of. And here he is posting podcasts because that's what he is. He's loyal to the viewers.
Yeah.
You know, he wants all of you guys listening right now to enjoy your weekly podcast. We know it's a part of your schedule. You're on your
Oh
way
my
to
gosh.
work, on your way home from work.
So disappointing if it's not.
I mean, it throws off everyone's day, I'm sure. And so here he is making sacrifices for the greater good.
And he just loves Shower Law Firm too.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, I mean, I guess when this is coming out too, we'll throw up some pictures of the baby.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
that's going to be exciting.
Yeah, that's very exciting. Gosh, it just seems like so long ago. I mean, the whole idea of having a baby, obviously it was long ago, over 25 years, but
Lots happened
but
since
how
then.
exciting. Yeah, very excited for him.
Well, yeah, I'm excited for him as well, and we'll see how things go. I'm always curious because you can never be prepared for parenthood, from what I hear. And as excited as people are, there's a lot of difficulties and a lot of learning curves that take place. So
A lot of lack of sleep, a lot of poop and vomit, and well, that kind of sounds like the story of me and the dogs. I don't know.
Yeah.
No sleep, poop, vomit.
that's fair. Puppies are pretty similar.
Oh, the adult dogs.
Yeah.
Some dogs are better behaved than others. Your dog.
I mean, I think you could compare that with humans as well. You'd hope as they grow up, you don't have to deal with that as much. But some.
True. Yeah, I was actually on Facebook. I saw them talking about Australian cattle dogs, which my dogs are mixes, but primarily Australian cattle dogs. And they said, describe them in one word, and there were all kinds of things. But the one that I guess won was crackhead.
Crackhead. I was gonna say chaotic, but
Yeah. Well, and then the one I liked was extra.
extra.
I thought that was cute.
Yeah, that's much more cuter.
Yeah, I prefer extra to crackhead, although there are times where crackhead is more accurate.
So how's your this week been for you so far?
Well, pretty good. Not a whole lot going on. So Sunday we finally made it to the Van Gogh immersive experience. That exhibit has been traveling around, and it's interesting because I was getting kind of whiny about it. Like, we kept we'd find ourselves in cities, and I was like, oh, let's go to it. And we just kind of never did. And then it was in Scottsdale for several months, maybe 6 months. And we kept saying, oh, we're going to we're going to plan and go up there. I think we even talked to you about maybe if you wanted to see it. I think that was probably a no, but
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
yeah. And so then it's in Tucson or Oro Valley. And we were like, all right, this is going to happen. And so finally we did go on Sunday. And it was good. It was not fabulous.
Was it immersive?
It wasn't that immersive.
Do you feel like you're in his paintings?
I did not feel like I was in his paintings.
So it doesn't sound that good.
But so I mean, it was there. It was kind of an exhibit talking about his life, and then there were like reproductions of his paintings, which were a little bit. I mean, I actually. Gosh, this was a while ago, but actually was when I was in law school in New York. They had a huge Van Gogh exhibit at the museum there, and the originals from all over the world had been collected, and so it was a really big deal. People traveled all from far away to come and see that, and so I actually saw like the real thing, and so it's kind of hard to match that.
Yeah.
But it was interesting, kind of just a little refresher on his life, and he's infamous for cutting off his ear.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, it was that was fine, and then you go into this really big room, and it's basically just like kind of videos. I mean, it is interesting, but it's kind of like bringing his paintings to life, so you feel like you're in it. But I don't know. I mean. It was good. I am glad that I went,
Yeah.
But in fact, Deborah was telling me that somebody had told her that it was just so intense they were just brought to tears, and I was like,
Jesus Christ.
I know. So, so maybe if that was what I was expecting, it was a little.
Seems a
It
bit
didn't quite
much.
live up. No, I was not brought to tears, but I'm glad I went. It was kind of a fun evening, and then we got to go out to dinner and hang out, and so that was good. But that was kind of like the highlight of my week.
That sounds like a good time. I think, yeah, brought to tears, I think is a little dramatic. But
It takes a lot to bring me to tears.
yeah, I mean, I think that's true. And some people, the bar is much lower for them. I always heard too with these famous art museums or these big art events where like the real pieces are coming out, that oftentimes, and the museums sometimes don't even know that they're fakes.
Oh gosh.
And they're just so well done. And then, once they get into circulation and once someone says that it is real and if it's that good, then, it kind of just gets lost in the mumbo jumbo. I don't know if that's a conspiracy theory. I don't even think it's conspiracy. I think that does happen, but how often it happens, that might be the conspiracy theory.
Yeah. And strange. I mean, I know that for me, like being in the room with this, the original, and just knowing that this artist, I mean,
Well,
his hands were on this, he created, there is something kind of moving about that. But I guess if I believed that and it was a fake, it still would work. I mean, although honestly, I wasn't brought to tears.
well, that's the thing is they just got to get you to believe it, like with the Mona Lisa. If that was a fake, but how it has all the plastic, what's it called, like the bulletproof covering, and you can't get close and all that. I mean, they could do all of that with a fake, and then that would be convincing, right? It'd be like, why would they ever do that for a fake? But that's how they get you.
Well, they wouldn't intentionally do that, but
I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe who knows? Who knows? The art world's a sticky place. I mean, and it's cool to think about it that at the time a lot of these people weren't super famous. Like their pieces.
he died in poverty.
Exactly.
I mean, and so his genius wasn't recognized, at least not broadly, until after his death, and that's always so sad too. And then these paintings have sold for $82 million and all of this. I mean, wow.
Where's the royalties on that shit? Where's the Van Gogh family coming in and saying, hey, where's my cut of the pie? Well, that sounds like a good time.
Yeah.
I'm not a very big art person. I've always been interested, but I wouldn't really go out of my way for it. And definitely not someone that will be moved to tears, but I just think it's interesting. And I like different styles of art too, because I think it's just different ways to express yourself and emotions, and the way people can take that in is very different. I also think there's some stuff that's a bit silly, but that's how everything is.
It's just, I mean, it's impressive to me because I don't have that creative side.
Yeah.
And so to see some of these, and if you kind of learn the history and how, it was new and unique and different, a different style and different process for the time. That's kind of interesting. I mean, I did take like one art history class, but that was about it, and it was a very long time ago. So pretty much just covering the basics. But yeah, I mean, especially now I have a little more time on my hands. Maybe I'll do a little more museum hopping.
Well, that's the argument with NFTs too, is that it's an art style, it's a way to do. One of the big areas of it is one-of-one art. I mean, artists will just come in and they do pixelated art, or they do, just different types of art. I don't even know what the official names are. But it's interesting seeing people that can kind of have that blank canvas and create something. And everyone always says, well, can't I just screenshot it and then I have another copy of it? But you could say the same thing with artwork. Like IRL artwork is, you can get copies of it. You can get copies of Van Gogh and put it up in your room, and it looks exactly the same. Maybe it doesn't have exact brush
You can
strokes.
get paint by numbers these days.
Yeah, exactly.
Do it yourself.
Exactly. So
I don't know if it would look like
I mean, there's differences, but I think similar ideas there.
Yeah.
But let's get into the week of topics here that we got going on. Updates on cases. Always
not a whole lot happening right now as far as updates on cases. One little tidbit, we talked about the PFAS, the forever chemicals, DuPont, all of that, and how it's pretty much in everything, but primarily everybody focuses on the drinking water, which rightly so. And there was a study that came out that said that contact lenses, like 18 different brands of contact lenses actually tested positive for 100 parts per million of this, it was called organic fluorine, an indicator of PFAS, which is apparently 50,000 times the EPA's safe drinking water limit.
So there's a lot of numbers there. 100 parts per million. Don't know what that means, but then it's 50,000 times more than
is okay.
Then is
So
okay.
that's probably the important thing is, there's a certain level that's considered safe, and this is way over that.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's, so, I mean, again, we're drinking the water. Now we're putting it in our eyeballs. I mean, I can't wear contacts anymore. My eyes are just too darn dry. So it's been a while for that. But, it's just like, oh, yikes. It's just, it's everywhere. And I think the more they test things, the more they're just going to find it in everything.
Yeah, and I mean, there's this whole argument too with how cancer and the rates of cancer have gone up like drastically over the last few decades. And does this kind of play into that, where there's these harmful chemicals that are just finding their way into every part of our life, and we don't even know the consequences of it, but it's coming out in different ways.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. And this is a big one. And of course, that's ongoing. As far as these companies are going to have to provide the ability for cities and water districts to clean their water, to filter it, that sort of thing. So the law is changing to require at least that these chemicals get cleaned out of our water. But like you said, I mean, just like the things we talk about here, this medication, that, I mean, things are in our environment, things are in our food. It's pretty depressing sometimes when you.
And so with the contact lenses, we talked about this last week too. There's just like some, body parts and organs that are just, it makes you cringe a little bit thinking that's something that can, and eyes are one of those just really sensitive parts of your body. With these contact lenses that have 5,000 higher rates of these chemicals, 50,000, Jesus. 50,000 high rates of these chemicals. Are the brands are there damages happening? Are there brands are the recalls going on? Is there anything being done with this information?
No, not that I'm aware of. And again, they're pretty much in everything, and certainly like in plastics. And so presumably, the material that they make contact lenses. Now that the study has been done, perhaps that will be something that's changed. No indication as far as what kind of cancer or how that would affect you. I mean, again, we talked about like with the eye drops. The eyes, any kind of liquid can that can get into your brain, it can get into your blood system. I mean, that's could be risky.
And so are there specific brands that people should be keeping an eye out for? Because, I mean, I know there's no consequences happening, no injuries taking place now, and it's kind of just a part of society now where there's these chemicals finding their way into various aspects. But if I wore contact lenses, which I don't, but if I were, I would want to kind of know and avoid these 50,000 time chemicals, higher rates of it in my lenses.
Yeah, it's 18 different brands, and I don't even know how many brands there are. The concern that and again, I didn't delve into this too deeply, but I suspect that most of the major brands are using similar materials, and it's probably just, this is a product that's going to, that is going to have those chemicals into it, and until they start making some changes.
Yeah, and it's just something that's going to probably more 18 brands, but more brands will probably come up because I'm assuming the standards of practice that take place by a variety of different contact lens companies is probably similar in a lot of ways. And the way that this chemical is getting in there is probably happening to a lot.
Yeah, well, it's just another sign. It's everywhere.
Yeah, I know. Scary. Okay. Well, and the PFAS was for water primarily, and I know the Gilbert area is kind of a hot spot for that, right?
Yeah. Well, there's about hotspots all over the United States.
Yeah.
Some have higher incidents than others.
And with the ones that we're covering is mostly focused in Gilbert. I mean, is that a case that individuals should be keeping an eye out for?
Well, so the actual water districts have their own claim for the costs of of purchasing and these new filters and the whole filtration devices, but then individuals also have cases, and so we have taken a number of calls and of individuals. So
Cases, speaking of taking in calls, cases we're handling.
What are we handling? Yeah. So this topic, and this one, this really bothers me. And any anti-vaxxers will love this. Um, it does involve a vaccine, a relatively new vaccine, and this is the Gardasil vaccine, which is for the prevention of infection with the human papilloma virus, the HPV virus, right?
Yeah.
HPV virus. And that is, it's the virus that causes genital warts, and it's well known for causing cervical dysplasia and potentially cervical cancer. So, and it's a common thing. A lot of people have been exposed to it. And so, and this was, I remember when it came out, actually, it was in 2006, which now it sounds like a long time ago. But it came out and they started pushing parents to vaccinate their preteens, the young girls and young boys, saying, get this vaccine now. And there were like 3 doses of it. Get this vaccine now, and you can save your kid from having cancer, basically.
Oh, wow.
Which sounds like, well, holy crap, of course I'm going to do that.
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. And then, and they had these ad campaigns that were just unbelievable, where they would have these kids, who had been diagnosed with cancer, and they would say, to their mother, did you know? Like, did you know that you could have saved me by getting this vaccine? Why didn't you? And when it first came out, I will tell you that and again, it's, with primary care doctors, that this new thing comes out, it gets pitched to them. They're like, oh, prevent kids from having cancer. Okay, sure. They don't have time to go into all of the studies and this and that. And, and it's a new thing, and I don't like new things.
Yeah.
And so they were pitching it, and I remember them really pressuring me to give it to you.
Really?
Yeah.
Did I get it?
You did not.
Thank God.
No, you did not.
Perks of having a personal injury.
There are a lot of downsides, but there are some upsides too. But so it was approved for girls in 2006 and boys in 2009. So, it sounds like this, oh, well, of course we're going to do it. But of course, there's more to the story. There almost always is. And, the first thing is that the HPV, there are hundreds of strains.
Yeah.
And so a vaccine is only going to, it's going to target certain strains. And when it first came out, it targeted 4.
Out of hundreds.
Out of hundreds.
Jesus.
Yeah. And so, there's always risks with vaccines, and we'll get into the really horrendous risks with this one and why. But, again, so you're putting this into this child's body to protect against 4 of the strains.
3 different shots too.
Yeah. And then, so over the years, they have expanded it. The most recent one is called Gardasil 9. And as you can imagine, that protects against 9 strains.
Wow.
Still 9 out of hundreds. And then also you need to look at, okay, what's the situation with, what exactly is it protecting against? And so the virus can cause cervical cancer, but so that's why people have pap smears all the time, every year. That's basically what they're looking for. And oftentimes you'll see like what they call dysplasia. It's like it may be precancerous, or, your cervix is reacting, and they can they can freeze it. They can do like where they cut it off. There are things that they can do to prevent the cancer from developing. And so, if you get full-blown cervical cancer, and again, even if you get that, they can remove the cervix.
Yeah.
So again, if you catch it early, it's more often than not fatal. But so what we're doing is we're protecting these young kids from something that might happen to them 10 years, 20 years into the future. And again, if it didn't have any risks, maybe that would make sense, but it does.
And it's only protecting against a handful of the hundreds and hundreds of different strains. And so what are some of these risks and problems that are coming up?
So what it does is it messes with your autoimmune system. So it's autoimmune conditions. And the crazy thing about this and why it does is that that the HPV, people don't react really strongly to it, and oftentimes people get exposed to it. They don't get infected, they don't become carriers, or maybe they become carriers, but they don't, So it's not. They needed to make the body react, and so since the virus itself wouldn't do that, they decided to add aluminum.
Oh, to the vaccine.
Aluminum.
That is insane.
So there's aluminum, which causes the body to react to it. But the problem with aluminum is that it's a neurotoxin and an inflammagen.
Yeah.
So it causes, so it has the aluminum and then it has the HPV there. And so it gets that into your system. And then in theory, it protects against, since the HPV gets in, it's going to protect you from it.
No.
But the other thing is that it hasn't ever even been proven that it does prevent cervical cancer.
Jeez.
Even that it even prevents it. So there's that, and so but the aluminum.
Well, so how can they even advertise it where it's going to prevent and protect against these cancers if there isn't studies? Isn't that false marketing and misleading marketing? Isn't there laws against that?
Yeah, and one of the biggest things is that that they're saying that it's safe, and to determine if a vaccine is safe, you have to do a placebo trial. So you have to give somebody an inert vaccine. But what it turns out they did in this case is that they did the vaccine that has the HPV in it, but then they did another one that didn't have HPV, but guess what? It still had aluminum. It was not inert. So then they said, the placebo group and the group that got the vaccine, the full vaccine, had similar outcomes. Well, yeah, they did, because they got the bad stuff in both.
Yeah.
So this is why there's a big fat lawsuit over it. And again, why are they doing this? Well, the very first year it came out, $3 billion. Well, you're going to give it to every kid.
Yeah, and the way that they're marketing it too, it's like you're a shitty parent if you don't.
Totally. And then at this point, it's $7 billion. It's up to $7 billion annually. So
annually too. Wow.
So big bucks on this thing. So what it does is it messes with your immune system, and it can cause autoimmune diseases. Mm-hmm. And the biggest one that we're seeing is what's called POTS, POTS, which stands for postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome.
Mm-hmm. I've heard of this. POTS sounds so familiar.
Yeah.
But what does it do?
Well, it does a lot of things. And this was something that I learned about recently, because I always think of it as when you stand up, you get dizzy.
Yeah.
And that's the primary thing, the postural, situation. And what it does is your heart doesn't beat fast enough to circulate the blood when you're getting up.
Yeah.
But there's so many other things that go along with it. And it's also very kind of nebulous, some of these symptoms, that you wouldn't necessarily relate it to a vaccine. You might just think it was a normal situation for teenagers.
I like that word,
or preteens.
Nebulous.
Yeah, but so the symptoms are dizziness, tachycardia, so that's your heart racing, headaches, vision issues, light and sound sensitivity, loss of consciousness and fainting, GI issues, numbness, chest pain, severe joint pain, sleep issues, cognitive dysfunction. It crosses the blood-brain barrier, menstrual irregularity, fatigue, tremor and weakness in extremities. And some of these kids have ended up wheelchair bound. I mean, completely disabled.
From the vaccine. Well,
from the
POTS,
vaccine. Yes, from the vaccine and then the POTS.
it causes POTS, and then it does all. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, there's some other problems too, but the POTS is the big one. But just like talking about those symptoms, I mean, you have, a preteen or a teenager says, oh, I'm tired. Oh, my joints hurt. And they're out at soccer practice or I have headaches or, I mean, some of these things that they may not even complain about, or some cognitive issues. Well, so they're having a hard time in this class. There's been some real delay in even getting diagnosed, unless they're really having significant issues with this dizziness and actually fainting. Mm-hmm. They oftentimes don't get in and get a full run up of tests.
And POTS, because it's an autoimmune disease, that's not, autoimmune diseases aren't curable. There's only things that you can do to try to reduce. To try to
treat the symptoms.
Yeah. That's so crazy. And so this is coming up now. And is this a lawsuit that has just recently started? First of all, how did they realize and make this connection as, okay, this is this vaccine causing all these problems? Because like you said, the type of issues that they're having are very hard to kind of pinpoint and make a connection. Very nebulous.
Yeah.
So how did they make that connection? And then when has these lawsuits kind of started?
Well, so a couple of things. First, because it's a vaccine, there's a different process. You can't just automatically sue.
Yeah.
You have to go to a vaccine fund. There's like a vaccine court, and so most vaccines they have protection, and you basically make a claim to the court if you had and there's specific things that we know come from certain vaccines, and so if those are one of the conditions that you get after you get the vaccine, you get paid a set amount of money, relatively straightforward. So this had to go through the vaccine court first, but because it was an autoimmune disease and it's not something that they're set up to handle.
Yeah.
What they do is you still have to go through the process. You have to file it there, and you have to wait 240 days. And if they don't respond and they don't resolve your case, then you can file. And there is a multi-district litigation that was established in 2022 for these specific cases, so the autoimmune cases. And the way that we know that it's related, and I won't be good at explaining it super well here, but it's really fascinating because there's like these sequences, and I don't even know the terminology.
Like strains.
Yeah, the strands. And so there are some. So the POTS has like, I don't know. I think it's like 5 of the 12 or something, and several other that might look like it. But the scientists have it down to say this makes sense why this vaccine causes this condition. So it's a really strong link. And actually, I do have, there's some studies and things, and we can link to that for people who want to kind of read it and try to understand it. But there's a really strong correlation that this particular condition is a result of the vaccine.
It's like asbestos, where, those cases are really big, but they're pretty clear cut because asbestos causes very specific types and strains of diseases. And so with POTS, even though POTS is kind of a very large autoimmune disease, the type of POTS and like the specifics behind it and what they can actually observe is directly connected and had to the vaccines.
Yeah, and then they see it within this time frame as well. So it's really bad stuff. Now, a couple of other things, it also can cause premature ovarian failure and actually cause cervical cancer and potentially some other autoimmune diseases. But the really strong link is the POTS.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and so the very first lawsuit that was filed back in 2018, and it was filed by the parents of a 13-year-old boy who died. Yeah, who died. Well, many of his children have died. I mean, and it's so crazy. Well, again, parents, I mean, you just want to make sure you take care of your kid. And when the doctor says this is a way to keep them safer, of course you're going to do it. Yeah. But what they were not doing is they were not warning about these really significant risks. Now, I remember, so this was a ways back when the doctor was telling me about it, and I knew that there were issues with it. And I don't even recall back in 2009 what I was aware of, but I knew that the very limited efficacy that, it would only protect against, a very few of the strains, and that there's always a risk, and it was really new.
And he was recommending it.
Oh, absolutely. Wow. Absolutely. And definitely doing the guilting thing.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And that's so hard for, you are experienced, you know about a lot of this stuff, but for any, normal parent that doesn't have this background, that doesn't have this knowledge and this education of this specific area, like you said, they go into a doctor's office and they recommend it and almost on this verge of guilt tripping of, this is going to benefit you. This is protection for your kid. I can't even imagine trying to say no to that. You'd feel terrible.
I mean, of course you wouldn't. But then on top of that, I mean, cervical cancer is a horrible thing, but you can't get cervical cancer. You're a boy.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, yes, we could, you could get venereal warts, which would not be good, but there are a lot of ways to avoid doing that. I mean, using condoms, there's ways to prevent that.
Autoimmune disease is just a different cup of tea. That is just like a big thing.
Yeah, well, it really is. And I was like, okay, I'm going to give it to my son and risk death and horrible things, and so that he doesn't potentially infect some other girl that I don't even know right now, and maybe she's got the vaccine, even though it's only going to protect her from, at the time, 4 or 6 and now 9 of the strains. It's just the whole thing was way too shaky for me to want to be willing to risk it. But yeah, I just, and then and so the parents in this were just saying, they couldn't believe that they didn't have any kind of warning about this, and they certainly didn't know the limited benefits. And it's always, you've got to weigh. I mean, everything has its risks, and to make that decision, you need to know what the downsides are and what the upsides are.
Yeah.
And the upsides have to be way better than the downsides.
And I mean,
it's just not here.
Like we said, autoimmune disease is just a completely different cup of tea. So if you think that you're risking anything like that for a vaccine, it changes the conversation completely.
It should,
and you mentioned in 2006 is when it was approved for women, young women, 2009 for young men. When did issues start coming up that, obviously there were issues that were already saying that here are the risks, but when were there stuff coming up that wasn't mentioned as part of the risks?
Well, it took quite a while to kind of figure out the whole POTS connection, and I'm not sure exactly when that happened. It has been several years for sure. The cases started getting filed. The multi-district litigation was consolidated in 2022, so that's relatively new. And so once the litigation starts, that's when the exchange of information starts as well. So when you start getting the internal documents, and so we'll have a lot more information about what kind of adverse events they were aware of, how soon, that sort of thing. But I can't imagine that's going to look too good because again, it's big bucks, and if you can convince everybody to have this thing, you're going to go over $7 billion, right?
Yeah, I mean, and I think you can't talk about this without having some type of connection to the COVID vaccine, because I think that when that was being very big, right, and everyone was taking the vaccine, and I'm not someone that's anti-vax in any way, but a lot of my friends were almost like, obviously there's no issues, like there's no problem. The FDA approved this. Like, how could there be any problems? And that was something that was frustrating for me, is like, even though I'm not anti-vax, it's like, well, hold on, having this blind faith that is like, they said this isn't going to be an issue. Like, yes, here are the risks, but that's it. That's all there is. Like, why not take it? Because that's all there is. Well, it's not as simple as that. There can be other issues out there. I'm not saying COVID vaccine has those problems, but I think this is a great example of something that obviously is FDA approved. They wanted as many people to take it as possible because it's big bucks, and there were issues that they didn't mention, and maybe they didn't know about it at the time, but it definitely came up a lot sooner than when we figured it out and when these cases started getting pushed to court.
Right. Well, and the FDA approves them based on the studies that are provided by the company that's trying to get approval. And we know at least one thing they did was they did not have an inert vaccine. They didn't have a true placebo. So, there's some issues with it getting approved. The COVID vaccine is very different because that was approved, under emergency circumstances.
Yeah, I would say kind of more concerning there, right? Because...
Well, so definitely, I mean, it was rushed through as a public emergency, and again, it's scary because if you know anything about this end of the business, that they're not always, these drug companies are not always totally on the up and up. And of course, something like the COVID vaccine, I mean, everybody's going to get it, right? I mean,
if there's big bucks, really, that's as big as it gets.
It's as big as it gets, and protections because of the emergency approval and that sort of thing. So that's, a whole different issue, and there are certainly cases they're still figuring out, issues with the vaccines, and, potential compensation for that. But that's we're not handling COVID vax cases. I'll just say that, just a heads up. But we are definitely handling Gardasil vaccine cases.
Yeah, and it's funny because the COVID vaccine thing is coming up again. I don't know if you've seen this in the news, but where they're discussing like a new strain coming out.
Oh yeah, people are starting to mask again.
Maybe some lockdown procedures. Hopefully not as extreme, and probably not as extreme as in the past. But some of those procedures coming back, as well as a new vaccine and all that. So it's just interesting that kind of has been coming up in the last week or two, that I've been seeing a lot of it, and as well as...
I try not to look. I'm like, I don't want to... Some things I just don't want to know.
Yeah, mainstream media. I know
that for sure.
So Gardasil vaccine, I mean, that's really interesting. That's cases that we're handling, that we're taking. How does someone recognize that they might have a case? You know, I'm assuming there's going to be kids like myself, where I was at an age where I could have taken it. Now I'm above 18. I'm 25 now. If they have POTS, should they be reaching out? If there's parents that have seen issues that's similar to what you're talking about, should they reach out? How does that go?
Well, definitely. So if they've had the vaccine and they've had any of these symptoms, they may have been diagnosed. And if they do, they need to reach out right away, because there are some really strict time frames, because you have to go through the vaccine court.
Yeah.
And so the vaccine court, there's a 3 years from the time you start developing symptoms deadline. And so, but again, these are such weird symptoms. I mean, if somebody just says they're tired, they're fatigued, their joint hurt.
That's
I mean,
like every day for me. I mean, come on. I'm a sleepy
well,
guy.
no, you definitely are. Although you have a little more excuse than average people. But kids. I mean, kids are notoriously sleepy and achy and have headaches. And do they really have a headache, or they just don't want to go to school? I mean, so you may go a decent period of time with those symptoms before you even go to the doctor for the first time.
Yeah.
So again, and I would just say too that parents who are choosing to go with this vaccine, keep a really close eye, be aware of these symptoms if you see them. Because again, I mean, if you see them, you don't want to get the second one, you don't want to get the third one.
Yeah.
Get into the doctor, and specify. Because again, if a doctor's not really familiar with this, POTS is a weird thing. It's not, it's not.
I mean, autoimmune disease in general
They're
are
always hard. Yeah, they're always hard to diagnose.
really hard to
actually.
diagnose. They're just a lot of just kind of small, very vague symptoms that can be applied to a variety of different situations and lifestyles. And so it's really hard, and especially trying to make that connection to the vaccine.
Yeah.
And so people are still able to get this vaccine now. People are still
Oh
getting
yeah,
it.
absolutely. They're still pitching it. They're still pushing it. I haven't seen as many of those kind of guilting ads
Yeah.
lately, but it's definitely still out there. So I would just say that, again, if you or your child has had the vaccine, is having these issues, it may or may not be diagnosed. Get into a physician, let them know this is a concern that you have. But definitely you need to move faster on this. And again, it would go through the Vax court first, and then ultimately would go into the multi-district litigation. And that is, they're actually moving quite along. There's already bellwether trials that have been selected. There haven't been any trials yet. They're expecting that probably next year, possibly even into 2025, depending on how long the discovery process happens.
Yeah.
But I think these are going to be pretty strong cases, and again, the injuries can be really significant. And if these kids are so limited, I mean, they're going to need some compensation. They're going to need to be taken care of.
Well, especially, I mean, even on the punitive side of things, right? I mean, $3 billion the first year, $7 billion annually at this point. I mean, it's gonna take a big slap on the wrist for them to feel it at this point as well.
Yeah.
And for how long it's been going on. And I think it's just really interesting too how you mentioned a lot of these issues that side effects that people are having as a kid. Those are things that are often brushed under the rug.
I know. That's the hard thing.
And it's not even necessarily the parent's fault, because it's difficult. I know when I was having joint pains as a kid, and I was going to the physician, and he was like, "Oh, it's just growing pains," which I can't be mad at him about it. Obviously, he didn't know it was arthritis, but everyone was having growing pains. I'm sure there's a lot of kids coming in having those joint issues, having those bone problems, and then I was really fatigued and tired. It's like, oh well, are you watching TV an hour before bed? Yeah. Of course, who isn't?
Are you staying up late playing video games?
Yeah,
all of that. Yeah.
And so it's hard with this stuff specifically. It's really hard, and especially with kids, where it's just pinpointing these issues and figuring out, well, what's part of growing up, what's part of the lifestyle, what's part of just who they are, and what's not.
Well, and I think, they always say that if you hear hooves, think horses, not zebras. And I mean, the doctors, they're going to always think, well, what's the common thing, not what's the really weird, unusual thing. But maybe combine that with, did they just have a vaccine for this? Did these things start happening in time, close in time with this? Because then maybe it is the zebra.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not just what every kid has. Maybe it's an autoimmune issue.
Yeah, so definitely reach out. And that's interesting, too, that this case takes a different path than the ones that we've talked about in the past, going through these vaccine courts. And the vaccine courts that you mentioned to me, where it's an issue, if it's an issue that was warned and that you're experiencing it, there's already kind of a pot of money there where if you
Yes.
fit into this specific group, which often happens with mass torts, where once it's settled, then there will be specific kind of levels to cases. And if you fit in that, then you get paid out from that pot.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's unique cases as well that are just, very
Yeah.
extreme. And so it's interesting with this that it has a similar kind of dynamic, but it's different because of the time schedule. I mean,
Well, and it's also, it's actually probably more like even kind of the bankruptcy situations, because there's, there's set compensation. Actually, you're probably right. It is more like that. But there's so set numbers for certain conditions, but it is quicker. It's not a whole trial.
Yeah.
I mean, it obviously protects the companies from having to, looking at punitive damages, that sort of thing. So, I mean, it can be efficient, and, it makes sense for these well-known side effects. Again, they're rare, but they do happen. And so the people who have them need to get compensated. This is actually the very first vaccine that's the subject of a multi-district litigation for that
Really?
reason. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, and it's just, it's very unique.
That's so crazy. I'm wondering if we're going to see this in the news more now too. That's coming up because, like you said, it kind of goes along with the entire anti-vax agenda that's been getting pushed. I mean, I remember the whole like vaccine caused autism thing. That was like, obviously insane. But this is something this is a very real issue. There's direct connections between this vaccine causing very serious problems, POTS and autoimmune disease. And now with all these extremists on the COVID vaccine side, I'm wondering if news outlets are going to pick this up and, feed it to the masses, because I'm sure this is going to, get views up.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised that it hasn't been in the news more. But as this heats up, perhaps it will. I mean, I hope that it is, because I think that parents, need to know all of the information
Yeah.
and really understand the risks. That, again, maybe their primary care doctor. I mean, the primary care doctor has so much in their hands, and it can't keep up on all of these specific little, different areas. So, hopefully that will just be more information out there, and that they can research it themselves before they
Yeah.
make a decision.
And I think too, it goes back to the whole blind trust thing. It's a kind of culture that we have where, the what's it called, where when you trust people just because of their standing, it's like it's part of ethos, pathos, and logos. It's like part of logos. You're something like, I don't know, details in there, but
Impressive.
it goes back to kind of when parents are going to the doctors, that there's going to be things that are recommended, or you're going to be told that you should be doing things in this medical area with these prescriptions, with these vaccines, with whatever it is, to always kind of take a second look at it, because even though the doctors always want the best and they always have your best interests in mind, like you said, sometimes they just don't know. There's a lot on their plate, especially the general physicians. I mean, there's so many different areas that they're looking at and that they're treating, and to know every single area and every single medication in that, and the depths and the risks of it.
Impossible. Yeah,
Impossible.
absolutely impossible. But yeah, and be comfortable asking questions, and doing your own research. I mean, we have the ability to do that now than we certainly did in the past, more so now.
It was a logos authoritative figure. It's a whole thing. I'm remembering that now. Communication. Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, so if anyone has any issues with POTS, or has taken this vaccine, or kids have taken this vaccine and has those issues, definitely reach out. And hopefully this is a case that we start to see in the news. Speaking of cases in the news, what are some interesting ones that have been coming up in this last week?
Well, another unfortunate child at bed situation, and another recall. And this is a bed. It's called a Zippity Kids.
Zippity doodah.
Just Zippity, no doodah on there. Zippity Kids bed, and they're these they're convertible house bed frames and Montessori floor beds, and it's similar to what we talked about last week with the bunk beds. There's an entrapment and strangulation hazard with these beds. They've been recalled as of August 17th. There's about 7,500 of them out there, but definitely dangerous, can lead to strangulation and or death. And
How's
then will
this one
pop up.
causing it?
So again, it's the slats, and I'll show you this picture. Kind of converts into different shapes, but you can see they actually have a diagram of how a child can get trapped and
Oh, it put
stuck.
their head through the
Yeah,
bars. Yeah, I mean, when you showed it to me already, I could see the bars were pretty
yeah,
big.
it's not a
That's
good.
terrifying.
Yeah, and so this is a situation, and again, they're out there. They're not selling them anymore, but they could be at a child's daycare. They
Yeah.
could be in your home. Take a look. Make sure you don't have these things. They were sold between February of 2018 and September of 2021. The company is called Bell Station Interiors, and they actually are no longer in business. They've filed for bankruptcy.
Oh, wow.
So this is not a situation where there's going to be a lot of lawsuits in all likelihood. It doesn't
Yeah.
sound like there's going to be assets there, although, who knows? I mean, it would be something that would be investigated. But they're not offering refunds or anything like
I
that.
don't even have funds to do that.
Yeah, there's no offer of a refund, anything like that. But, Consumer Product Safety Commission, everybody, basically you need to throw these things away.
Yeah.
Don't resell them. Don't donate them. Throw them away.
Yeah, I was gonna ask because the last issue with the bunk bed, the company was Vietnamese,
Right.
and so that was the big issue. Is that we couldn't get in contact with them. They were ignoring all of these summons, called a summons, and then obviously they just didn't show up to court and were defending themselves. But this is something different because they just are already bankrupt.
Right. So the likelihood of getting compensation is not great. So really, we're talking about this not so much from a lawsuit perspective, but this is a dangerous
Public
product, and if you have it, get rid of it because
God, that's terrible. I mean, already, if you have any issues, along these lines, no amount of money is going to make up for any injuries to your kid. But, to at the very least, it's something. It's never going to fully fix a problem, but making sure you don't have to worry about bills going in the next few months, next few years. That helps a lot. Helps a lot of people. And so with issues like with this type of issue, like you said, it's not really a lawsuit situation. It's more of a public warning, public service because they're already bankrupt. And if there's any, if you've had any issues with, there's not much you can really do.
They can't replace them, repair them, just destroy them, get rid of them for sure. So.
Well, that's good that you kept us updated. Hopefully there's not more beds. It's really unfortunate. There's always infant beds too.
Oh my gosh. Well, infant beds, infant pillows. I mean, man.
To be fair, I guess they are very fragile.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm glad you've made it to adulthood.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah. Thank God I made it because then we wouldn't be having this podcast if not. So here we are. What else has been going on?
Well, so actually we were going to talk about this last week and then we ran out of time, but we have talked about with the eye drops and some other products that you can sue different companies in the chain of commerce. So it might not just be the manufacturer of a product, but it might be the seller of a product. And there's a case that's been in the news now actually for several months in a pretty horrifying issue. And that is that a number of people are using sodium nitrite to commit suicide.
Jeez.
Yeah, and so it's one of these things that got really popular on like TikTok and some of the social media sites, and a couple of celebrities have committed suicide using this product. I guess one of them, and I didn't know who this was, Matthew Mindler. I wasn't familiar with him, but he was in something called My Idiot Brother and An American Boy.
I think of those are movies, but don't know the actor.
Yeah, he was only 19 years old, and he just died. I guess it was in August of 2021. He passed away, and what's happening is that they're talking about it on these sites, and I guess there are suicide forums online, and they talk about like a painless way to die, and so it's this stuff called sodium nitrite that you consume, and what it is it's like a food preservative. It's like a salt kind of product that cures meat.
Yeah.
So if you're making like jerky at home or something.
When you have a bag of jerky and then there's that packet that says "do not consume," but it's always in every bag, or it's
I don't know if that's what that is.
yeah,
Interesting.
and then like pre-workouts and stuff like that, though there's a little bag of, powder, something like that, and it's never open. It's always there, and it says like "do not eat" or keep it in there for preserving reasons. So I'm assuming that.
I'm not sure what that is, but this is actually, it's like a bag of stuff that looks like salt, and we'll put up a picture of it. And actually, it turns out, I was kind of checking to see how easy it was to find, and I Googled it, and sure enough, it was very easy and cheap to find.
And so are these just in the form of pills that people are taking?
Well, it's a bag of, it looks like salt.
Yeah.
Okay. And so, and again, it's used for people who are curing meats. Like if you hunt and then you want to make jerky out of something, you use it to,
This pink
to
salt does
preserve
look
it.
pretty tasty.
You could even get, I know, you can get the Barbie version of
Yeah,
it. Looks
if
like,
you want to die in fashion.
well, currently, yeah. But it only costs about $15, and you can get it on Amazon, like basically the next day. So it's, you don't even have time to like chill out and rethink things. So it's quick and it's cheap, and they're putting it into pill forms, putting it into capsules or swallowing it. So this one celebrity, Matthew Mindler, and then also Lindsay Pearlman, who was on Empire. She killed herself using this.
Wow. Empire's a big show.
Yeah, yeah, and so it's become this thing. I mean, it's just
Phenomenon.
I mean, it's so crazy. But the thing about suing the manufacturer of the product is that it says all over it that it'll kill you. I mean,
Yeah.
it's they warn, don't eat this shit.
Yeah.
I mean, so the product is not defective. So what happened was there were a number of lawsuits that were filed against Amazon. And so the parents of some of these kids said, you're selling this really super dangerous product to teenagers, and there's no indication that they're meat curing.
Yeah.
And so part of the lawsuit alleged that they were assisting or aiding in suicide, which is a crime.
Yeah, that's a big crime.
Yeah. And so there were some lawsuits filed. They got dismissed. They got dismissed based on the judge saying, wait a minute, again, this is not a defective product. It is dangerous. It is poisonous. It says it's poisonous. So there's no lawsuit. And then there was some issue about how much information Amazon had about it. One of the allegations is that, when it pops up with a product, how it says, you also might like this.
Yeah.
Well, then they had these anti-emetic things to keep you from vomiting, and like how-to books and things like that.
God.
And so that kind of algorithm is a big problem because
Yeah.
it's like, oh, okay, you want this? Let's make sure you don't throw it up. I mean...
Yeah.
So that allegation, and then once the cases were dismissed, they actually appealed it because since that time, some emails came out. Well, actually, a parent whose son had killed himself had written 56 emails to Amazon saying, here's the situation, and they were going back and forth and saying that they were going to investigate it. So that then became evidence that they knew.
Wow.
They definitely knew before these other 5 kids, there's 5 combined in one lawsuit right now, killed themselves. They knew that that's what kids were doing. And a lot of the online companies don't sell it anymore.
Yeah. Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like-
I mean, and if you think about it, you could just simply restrict, who you're selling it to, require another step or something. But teenagers don't need this stuff. So that, well, then Amazon was saying, hey, we're not liable if people intentionally use something to commit suicide. So it'll be interesting to see,
Yeah.
with all of these, I mean, there's some pretty nasty facts going on with this.
I was gonna say, I mean, at first I was kind of on Amazon's side where I was like, well, they sell everything. I mean, you
Right.
can literally get anything there, and being conscientious of every little thing, because I'm sure there's a lot of stuff in there that you could kill yourself with. Well, if there's an extra sharp knife that just goes in a little bit easier, it's a kind of a sticky subject. But with the evidence that you mentioned, where especially the mother of one of the kids that had killed himself emailing them 50 plus emails going back and forth. I mean, they knew of it. And then the algorithm, which is insane because, I mean, that's something that, they obviously worked on a ton. It works on me all the time. I'll buy something
Oh, yeah, I
and
need
I'm
that
like,
too.
wow, okay, I didn't even think of that. That's a great idea. But the fact that they're actually also recommending things that are in line with that.
Yeah, that don't have to do with hunting and curing
Yeah.
meat and packaging it up or anything like that. Yeah, and I don't know how much of that is intentional or just automatically
I think it's
happens.
more automatic,
You know,
but when it already comes to when someone's already telling you this is a risk and then that is still happening, I think that makes it,
yeah. And you also could have to prove your age for certain things. I mean, there are different things that you potentially could do, but I guess a lot of other companies simply don't sell it online anymore. And then if you want to cure your meat, you're going to have to actually go to a store and present yourself, and
yeah.
or like, so I think they like sporting goods places and that sort of things would carry it.
Yeah.
So
That's interesting. I am curious to see how that plays out because I think you can kind of see it from both sides. I mean, now, like I said, or like you said, this evidence is pretty damning and
it's just very icky. And I guess I'm just a little bit surprised. I mean, here it's a $15 product. I mean, it's not like they don't sell enough things. It seems like it would be, okay, so that's one thing we just don't sell. I mean, I don't know.
Well, and clearly they still have it. They're still selling it.
Well, I looked it up, and then I just got a reminder today email because I didn't buy. We were going to talk about it last week, so I searched it last week, and then I just got a reminder about it today.
Oh my God, that's even worse. If someone looks it up and they're like, you know what, actually not today, and then a week later,
Hey, how about today?
yeah,
Is today a shitty day?
yeah, it's terrible, terrible, terrible.
Oh yeah. So anyway, but it's an interesting legal theory, and I'm very curious to see how that all plays out. So we'll keep up to speed on that.
We are coming to a close here on the show, but I know we did get one question in, and I think we always try to go out of our way to at least go through the questions that we get. It's one of my favorite parts. I know it's one of your favorite parts.
Well, and this was a funny, not really related to a case question, but that's
a good one.
Why I picked it, because I thought it was a good one. Yeah. And it was, I'm trying to decide if I should go to law school. Is it true most lawyers hate their jobs? And actually, the terminology was a little rougher than that, but that's the way it was. Yeah. So, and it's an interesting question because, there's been a lot in the news about how unhappy lawyers are and how stressed out we all are and that sort of thing. And I mean, law school is a big commitment. I mean, it's 3 years. It's a lot of work, and it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of money. You take out loans, and then you potentially can get stuck in a job because you got to pay off the loans if you don't like it. I think that it's very true that there are a lot of unhappy lawyers because stereotypically it's going to involve a lot of hours of work. It's, oftentimes not 9 to 5, but more than that. And starting out at the bottom rung of the ladder and all of that. So I think there are a lot of unhappy attorneys, but and I was very unhappy early on in my career. I mean, I definitely picked the wrong side at the beginning, and I was very unhappy. And in fact, during my very first job, I seriously thought about quitting. Not practicing law. At the time, I had been doing some malpractice defense work, and I'd learned a little bit of medicine. I thought it was really interesting, and I was like, I think I'm just going to go back to medical school because that sounds way more interesting.
Yeah.
And seriously considered that, but then I decided to switch to the other side and see if I was happier there, and ultimately I was. And then when I got into the mass torts, I really, really enjoyed. I've really enjoyed my job since that. So I think that. In law, there's so many different types of law and different types of jobs that there is something I think that can fit everyone. But I just think it's very important that you find that right fit. I mean, being a trial lawyer versus being somebody who writes wills is dramatically different.
Yeah.
And so, certain personality types will love one, certain personality types will love the other. I mean, and there's so many things in between there too. But there's great things. I mean, there's great opportunities to help people.
Yeah.
I think that and a lot of people just kind of, they don't know what to do after college, and so they're like, oh, I'll just go do this.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't recommend that necessarily. I mean, it doesn't hurt. I mean, the more education, the better, but it's going to cost you a lot of money. I would say just have a good idea of what area you're really interested in and you think will make you happy. Just to think it through. So I do know people who really have loved their careers and enjoy their jobs. Probably fewer than don't like it, but isn't that true? Like in all
Yeah,
careers?
I think especially the current day and age, it's everyone wants to find the job that they enjoy, that they don't hate, and that is fun going to work. But more than likely, most people won't, and it's not going to be. It's hard. It's very hard. And I know, obviously, I'm not a lawyer, but I was considering going to law school and was planning on it for a while, because of that feeling that you mentioned. I didn't really know what to do out of college, and an easy next step is going to higher education, whether it's master's, medical school, law school, or something, because it's just an extra step up, and afterwards it's going to hopefully make the job search and make your opportunities a little bit easier and have more of them. And when I was kind of figuring it out and I was talking to people, I was recommended to talk to people in the field that I was interested in going into, because I wanted to be a trial lawyer. I thought that would be really fun. I hated the idea of being in a cubicle or working behind my desk and writing documents all day. I wanted to be out there and kind of experiencing what I always imagined a lawyer was all about, which is going to trial. And so I didn't do that a bunch, probably not as much as I should have, but I think that's a big thing is if you're looking to go into trial law, like I was thinking criminal, especially when it comes to defense. And, there's a lot of people from what I hear that are open to that. You shoot out an email and you say, hey, what's your day-to-day like? Is there anything you'd like to do differently? Is there things that you really enjoy that you don't enjoy? And if it sounds like something that you might enjoy, then that kind of answers your question.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
I also think in current day media, the like lawyer. I've been watching Suits.
I was just gonna say that the way that you see what you see on TV is not day to day normal life.
Not even close. And it's like it's so insane to me because I've witnessed a lot. I've talked to a lot of lawyers, and so the way that it's shown is just out of this world different. Right. And especially, I mean, this is how every TV show is, right? There's massive time jumps. And it doesn't tell you, 2 months later, it just says like, okay, they had this deposition. All of a sudden it cuts to the trial.
Yeah, it's all in like a 60-minute segment, from the day that the client comes in till, the huge verdict and the celebration. And they're like, oh my gosh, not even close. They're going to be like 5-10 years in here.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that is kind of a slippery slope there. But I will say that, when I was doing mock trial and I was talking to Mike Jetty, a great trial attorney, some of like the drop the mic moments that you do see in TV shows, like that does happen.
Oh, yeah.
And being able to kind of really show your public speaking and your persuasion skills. I mean, those definitely do come out, just not as often and maybe not as flamboyant as TV shows.
Yeah. Oh no, there's definitely highs and lows and all kinds of things. Yeah. I mean, and if you want to do trial work, it's not boring. I mean, there are boring parts though.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought that was a good question. Yeah, you had good suggestions. Definitely talk to people who are in the area you think you want to go into and get their reality, because TV isn't. I mean, it's not for doctors either. I mean, Peter's constantly laughing at the things that they're screaming.
Grey's Anatomy.
Yeah, I mean that looks really glamorous and exciting too, which is probably why I contemplated medical school there briefly. But yeah. So anyway, good question, and I would just definitely you don't always have to ask us questions about particular cases. We're happy to answer anything we can.
Yeah.
I mean, ask Ben some questions. I don't know. He's got his expertise, and
I love talking.
Yes, you do.
Listening to myself talk. I'm good talking about myself, especially.
All right, maybe we'll have a good one for you next time.
I think we're going to close up now. I think it was a good show. Went over a lot of topics. I think the Gardasil vaccine was a really big one. And I'm sure we'll put in some more information there for people that want to do a little bit more of a deeper dive into it. If anyone does have any questions on topics we discussed this week, last week, life questions, whatever it is, we're always here. We're happy to answer them. We'll always make a little bit of time on every show. It's one of our favorite topics. But other than that, appreciate everyone tuning in with us. If you enjoyed, definitely throw a like, a subscribe, a follow, whatever it is, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, whatever it is. Keep up with us every Wednesday, putting out a show. Fernie, I hope he's able to keep up with us with with the new baby. I mean, congratulations to him.
Yeah,
It's
we're so excited.
Very excited, very excited. But hope everyone has a great week, and thank you for hanging out with us.
See you next week.
Prioritizing profits. Prioritizing
Dangerous drug and product cases.